A special treat for me because I first met Barry, it turns out 22 years ago, almost to the month, when I dialed in to my local bulletin board and posted on Alt-Sci Sociology, where do I study community and new technologies? And I only got one response back, and it was, you're in Canada, you go to Toronto and you study with Barry Wellman. And I was like, there was only one, it was the internet in 1990s, there was just 5 people out there. It was alt-sci sociology, I mean there was maybe 6 sociologists online, so I got one, that was impressive. And the response was, of course, go to Toronto, and I was particularly excited because I had been reading about Barry since my first year in my undergraduate, as a kind of leading community theorist, because of his kind of first area of expertise, which is the study of community from a social network perspective. But the only other people I had read about who were studying community were all from the 1800s and kind of unavailable to mentor fellow students. So I was really excited to find out that Barry was in fact still available to mentor. And that was 22 years ago. And kind of naively, I mean, he was probably just slightly older than I am now at the time. So Barry has kind of had a huge illustrious career, starting out Harvard-trained sociologist at a time when training in Harvard in sociology was a really big deal. In fact, my favorite Barry Wellman story to date is when he goes, the time I took a class with Stanley Milgram, and JFK was assassinated, and we stood up and went, really, Stan? Another experiment? Because of course, why believe something like that taking place in Milgram's class? And since then, Barry has, kind of risen through a number of areas of expertise. The one, of course, which we're here primarily talking about today, computer networks as social networks. Barry is I want to get this right, he's a member of the Royal Society of Canada. In 2012, the Toronto Globe and Mail pointed out that Barry had the highest H-index for citations of all Canadian sociologists. And they went and verified again this today. And it turns out, Barry, you are 51 citations short of 50,000 citations.
I know my H-index is...
And I checked this morning, and I was hoping that by the time you gave your talk this afternoon, you would have passed that. But it wasn't. I suspect they only update once a day.
That follows me citing myself.
It turns out you also have an H-index of 92, which means you are 8 away from entering this mythical list of Google scholars, of which there's only 1,500 who have more than 100 on an H-index, and that's in the world. I mean, that seems really high to me. Okay, great. You're also, the co-author of more than 200 articles and co-editor of 3 books, and co-authored, it says more than 80 scholars, but I'm not sure what that means. I think that means...
Co-authored with.
Co-authored with more than 80. I thought you had produced that many scholars, perhaps, which also wouldn't surprise me, as he's also won a number of awards for mentoring. So it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Barry Wellman, my mentor, and I think a really exciting person to get to hear from today. Thank you.
It's great to be here and plug the book. This is the one book I didn't edit, but actually co-wrote myself with Lee Rainey, who's the wonderful director of the Pew Internet and American Life Project, which produces the best data on the internet. We're talking a lot about this stuff. I forgot I'm in a media TV world here. I'll be talking a lot today about some of the themes in this book, and I'll just leave it there for now. And I have until 5 o'clock. Is that the basic idea? Or when people, or earlier when people run out? Okay. So, it's already told me that Keith has used up 15 minutes on this kind of thing. And I'm not a Mac person, so I don't know how to do it. So that's vaguely what I'm going to be talking about. I'm no longer at the University of Toronto, but Bev Wellman, who's over there, and we direct the NetLab network, and which is based in Toronto, and a lot of co-authors in some of the papers, including somebody named Keith Hampton, who many of you know. Keith and I just finished last night, really, a joint paper which we hope will get published in a couple of places. And we've been great working together, going back and forth. One of us has a predilection for multiple commas, and so the other one of us had to do a comma search. And, you know, that's you learn things about people when you do it. But enough about Keith. Okay. Does everybody here remember the Beatles? Some of you maybe too. You don't remember the Beatles? No? Okay, they were a singing group, Paul McCartney's former group. And it's okay. I didn't know we could do audiovisual here. I would have put in the song, but one of the songs they wrote was Eleanor Rigby. I can't sing All the Lonely People, Where Did They All Come From? And there's this, and it was a famous song of its time, which would be in the 1970s. And there's a statue in Liverpool, where the Beatles were from, of Eleanor. Actually, the statue is made by a less famous singer called Tommy Steele at the time. So it picks up on one of the themes. Keith and I actually put this in our joint paper, but it picks on a theme that I've been playing with for quite a while. Like John Lennon and Paul McCartney, we believe, and we think we document pretty well, that each generation believes that community and relationships were stronger in the past. That things are awful now, and actually since last November, that's probably true. And special call out to Michigan on that. And that it was good a generation ago, or in my case, multiple generations ago. I don't know how many I've lived through. Or as one British music hall song said, things ain't what they used to be. They were better in the past. How many people believe that we're in trouble now as opposed to being in good shape now? Curious.
It's a room of optimists, right?
Yeah. Oh, you're young. Okay. And then the boogeyman, or do we have to say boogie person now? For that is you got to take a pick. Some people think it's the evils of industrialization, urbanization, bureaucratization, capitalism, socialism. I should add populism to that list. But Keith and I on this paper focus on techno change, newspapers, TVs, cars, and of course the internet and mobile technology. Whoops, wrong thing. So you can trace this back. Tom Jefferson, you may have heard of. He was the guy that Hamilton worked for. You all know the musical Hamilton. Tom was a pretty important guy. In Canada, where I live now, we call him the Rebel. But Tommy thought that great cities were evil. They were like sores in the pestilence. And then you skip ahead. Anybody been in a school play or seen one of Our Town by Thornton Wilder? Nope. Okay. It used to be a very big play, and this little tiny village like that was life. Robert Putnam, in the more modern era, the year 2000, 17 whole years ago by now, but he actually started saying that before, wrote a book called Bowling Alone, and he said, isn't it awful that people are isolated now, that they do go bowling, but they bowl by themselves rather than in organized groups. And he thought TV watching did it. But now we think, those who do think that, including my nemesis Sherry Turkle at MIT, through the same line at the 11 o'clock seminar, but thinks that the internet is doing it. Or how many people here have had somebody walk into them, or almost, because they're looking at their mobile phone? Has that been a situation on this campus? It's certainly true at Toronto, where I live. We have it's near collision. Sometimes I don't get out of people's ways just if they're smaller than me, just to see. So there is this fear and feeling that the internet is disconnecting us, which is a bit bizarre because what are we doing on the internet? We're talking to our friends and relatives on Facebook. And this, maybe I could put this one slide earlier, is kind of the recurrent theme. That here we have the countryside, such as a lot of the beautiful area I saw coming in from Port Huron on Highway 69 to here. the beautiful green fields of Flint, Michigan, which have a lot of iron and lead in them, I understand. But and then there's in the background is a factory, and here is a railroad train, and they're disturbing with industrialization these fields. And the picture, and I borrowed this from Keith's previous paper, let's go up one slide, called Persistent and Pervasive Community, and a little bit more about that later, is that this is the way the world used to be in village-like settings. Anybody here grow up in villages? Any village people? I don't mean the gay group, I mean, you know. Big city people? Suburban people? Okay, so the myth is, and it partially was a myth, that the villages were densely knit. Everybody knew each other, they were tightly bounded, and, you know, away was 5 miles away, very local. They watched each other a lot. They had a lot of ties with kin and neighbors. Of course, that was partially true. I've been reading Jane Austen recently, and all of Jane Austen's novels, they're mostly set among the elites, and the elites are always getting in their carriages and galloping to New York or to Yorkshire from near London to see each other. But generally, that was the way people thought it was, and actually, I believe the way it was to a greater extent than now. Contrary, Tom Friedman wrote a book that some of you may have read called The World is Flat, which he claimed that there were no lumpiness, that everything was interconnected. He was mostly looking at economics, but it would be for social relations. I mean, how many people here are from another country? You look Canadian, are you? 8? Where are you from?
China.
China. Who else? Where are you from, sir?
Austria.
Austria.
China.
China? Any none? China? Germany?
Germany.
Okay. Where are you from, sir?
Zambia.
Zambia. I haven't been there. Where are you from?
Oh, my hand wasn't up. Sorry.
He's just looking at the internet. So Freeman talked all about it. He basically was anti-Trump before Trump really existed, saying that the economics people were building stuff all over the world, putting it together. But he was really kind of wrong because people were lumpy. They have different ties and different connections, but we tend to know people locally. I'm sure every one of you knows more people in East Lansing than any probability theorem would ever say, or back in your hometown. Where are you from originally?
Here.
East Lansing? You born and raised here? Oh my God. Queens, New York. I can see that from Professor Steinfeld, right? So you got ties back there and ties elsewhere. What we are arguing, and a lot of that is documented in this book, is that automobile travel and airline travel has made the world better connected. We've only moved since the 1970s to a situation where most households have 2 or more cars. Operationally, and practically, that means women now can go off on their own, because it used to be the so-called family car was the father's car. I mean, that's what patriarchal dominance is about, if you want to use that language. But that means that people can have independent friendships, independent shopping, and independent jobs, given the normal American and Canadian situation where they move over to different places. Then we have a slide that, this is United Airlines. No, it's not. This is all American Airlines, boardings in the US. And despite the really heroic efforts of United Airlines to convince us not to fly. What's the big airline in Detroit? It's Northwest, isn't it? Delta, okay. Well, Delta's probably a little bit better, right? Is it better?
They merged, actually.
They acquired
They
them.
merged.
They merged with, yeah, they own Northwest. They are Northwest now. That line is basically straight up without any log transformations or any stuff like that. This is a somewhat older slide. goes as far as 2007, because I haven't bothered checking the data since we got together for the book, but I would be surprised if we're any different. And I would also be surprised that United's flight will still increase, despite the heroic dragging of that guy off the plane that I'm sure you all know about 2-3 weeks ago, because they're a monopoly in many airports and you don't have much alternative to do it. What bothered me as a Canadian is that Air Canada has a joint setup, co-chair with United. They're in something called the Star Alliance. And Air Canada would, at least would have been nice if they had said, well, we don't do those sorts of things and we're not set with our partners, but they didn't say a word. The other thing that's happening, and this is from my friend Richard Florida's creative class book, is that as you painfully know, in Michigan, people used to make things with their hands. I mean, build cars, build stuff. And you all know that stuff. This is Michigan 101. And maybe why the election tilted away from Hillary, because she didn't realize that. But now people make stuff with bits, with computer bits. We all sit at our terminals and do things. Well, that has a lot of bad consequences, but the good news is people can travel. My wife Bev and I were working on the computer this morning, almost as easily as if we were working at home. So there's a lot of mobility. Doesn't depend on physical strength as much as on finger dexterity and computer smarts. And then the other thing that's happening, and maybe I've been seeing indications of this walking around the Michigan State campus, is that boundaries of dating and marriage, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, don't get scared, have really, really loosened up. In sociological jargon, they're less ascribed and more achieved. What that means is if you like somebody and have some interest, you go out with them, even if they're a different race, ethnicity, gender, or same gender in North America now than before. And that's a big difference from what happened up until 1967, which in 17 states in the U.S., it was illegal to have interracial dating. You get locked up for that. In fact, they just made a movie called Loving that this year. It's a nice movie about exactly that situation. So now we're less bounded. I mean, my parents were shocked when I was dating young women who were a different religious group from me, even though they were white like I am, different religious group. And if I dated a young man, they would have been freaked out totally. I never got to that solution. Okay, so what we're arguing is there's been a turn to networked individualism. And we think in part it's something I call the triple revolution. Lee and I spend 3.5 chapters talking about that in the book. One is the switch, because of some of these structural changes that I talked about, the social networks, reaching beyond the tightly bounded groups. The second is the internet. Obviously we know it weakens distance. The woman who said she was from Zambia, you here now? Or you left?
I'm still not.
So I bet you're Skyping back home or something, or emailing or something like that. Certainly folks in China are doing WeChat, unless you're very different than anybody knows from China. Toronto, by the way, has 500,000 Chinese people. A lot of them are students at the University of Toronto. So if you want good food, get out of East Lindsay. 5 hours down the road. And a little border crossing. Of course, whether you'll get back into the United States is now an interesting issue.
That's okay.
You got it handled?
Not coming back is fine.
Each to their own. So, but the internet's also personalized. It used to be that we communicated by telephone, and we didn't have mobile phones. We had landlines, what they're now called, what we called the telephone in the old days, which people, the whole family knew. When my girlfriend called, people would know that it was happening. I'll send you the slides if you'd like. You don't have to take the photo. Yes, it's good. And that means we can personalize how we communicate. Remember the move from groups and household boundary units to personalization? And now mobile. Mobile is really, I had a long time figuring out mobile stuff. But it's a hyper-personal appendage. I assume every one of you has a mobile phone in their handbag or their pocket. And it's part of your body. It's what my friend Leopoldina Fortunati calls the bird skin. And you're available to everybody, whether you like it or not. You all know how to shut off your phones by now, because that's good. Didn't used to be true. But you're accessible to everybody. I think the most poignant example was in a New Yorker magazine article about a month ago about soldiers fighting ISIS in Iraq, near Mosul. Anybody read that article? But the guys on one side of the boundary were talking to their wives and children inside Mosul on the ISIS side, and they were using their mobile phones to do it. And every time they moved around, their family members would move to another part of the ruined city to be able to connect with them. So this is something that only the mobile revolution could have facilitated on connectivity. Whereas when I grew up, when I was 20, I got on the internet in 1976, which was before it existed, but we had predecessors for it. Did you know about ICE, EIES, with Murray Tura? No? Okay. ARPANET, yeah. Various variations on that. And, you know, we were stuck at our homes. We were stuck in our office on the desktop. Now you all take it with you. And in fact, I'm surprised at how many people are, you know, about 4 of you have your laptops open. Would expect more. Of course, when I lecture, all my students have their laptop open, so they're all talking to their girlfriends or boyfriends. So you have to call on them. Oh, me? Yes, you. Okay, but that's exciting. But nevertheless, people are scared, even though we know, and Keith's done a lot of work, Professor Sheila Cotton's done a lot of work, Chip Steinfeld's done a lot of work, Bill Dutton's done a lot of work. People still think that the internet is disconnecting. I meant that I would give these slides out easily. I mean, you want to take pictures, take pictures. So you get all this kind of stuff by pundits. Pundit is a dirty word in my language. It's people who write newspaper or magazine op-eds and don't know what they're talking about. They don't have evidence, they have opinions. I'm sorry, I can't help blocking. And you got a lot of quotes like this. A guy named Stephen Marsh is saying Facebook makes us lonely. I mean, various kinds of things are coming out for different people. Sherry Turkle says, yet we have sacrificed conversation for mere connection. After many years arguing how she finally realizes that the bloody internet exists, but she says we're not having meaningful ties. Yet I bet you, in every room, every audience I've ever spoken to, almost everybody you speak with online is somebody you know in person, be it in Twitter, be it in Snapchat, be it in Facebook, which I've been using a lot these days. Is there anybody in this room who has a lot of people they know online that they don't know in person? I'm kind of curious.
The gamers.
Hmm?
Just the gamers.
The gamers, like Beverly Wellman there is a gamer, and she's always online with gamers. In World of
I
Warcraft.
didn't know what a gamer was.
It's stealing my punchline. Yeah, gamers seem to live in their own universes online, and that's not. Anybody a gamer here?
If they are, they wouldn't admit it now.
I'd be proud of it. I think, Keith, you told me when you were a resident don at MIT, you would have to break into rooms and pry these guys off the computers, unfold their fingers, and force feed them intravenously or something. That's true? Yeah. So, gamers are weird. Okay. So the thing is that once again we have this notion that that technology, in this case it's the internet and mobile, is doing bad things to us. Yet every single person in this room is heavily involved with this, and I think more or less happily involved with this. So what we have are networked individuals. As far as we can tell, and don't take any of these numbers very seriously, they're really vague. The average person knows about 600 plus. Who's that guy? Who's that? Princeton, he's now moved to, Matt Brashears was the one who came up with those numbers. And then I, in a variety of studies, came up with the notion people have about half dozen very close ties, a bunch of others pretty close ties, and about 27, 25, 30 people they know pretty well. Maybe your neighbors, maybe your dorm mates, people you worked with. And we know that they're geographically dispersed. One of the first reason, I grew up as a normal urban community sociology studying village-like things. The name Herbert Gans means something to you, and Jane Jacobs, my fellow Canadian, means something to you. They're all about village-like urban neighborhoods. And then we did the first East York study in the late 60s, 1968. And we found out that only 13% of these people's close ties were in the same area that they lived in. Yes, it was spread out Toronto. Now when we do the studies, they're spread out way beyond Toronto. And I've done a bunch of articles about distance stuff. And now that we know about mobile, you don't have to stay home. You could be, this gentleman here could be talking to his friend and getting ready for the Raptors game tonight. Sorry, I'm a Canadian. And stuff like that. And Keith has been coming up with an argument that is pervasive and persistent and pervasive ties, and that came out in 2016 in what journal?
ABS.
American Behavioral Scientist. That the notion is that now when you come from China or Zambia or Canada, you still have relations back there that you're in touch with. So in some ways we're going back to the old village, but the village is on Facebook. The real difference is that each of us has our own unique village on Facebook, and it varies from person to person. So we have, this is another slide I borrowed from Keith, article. We have networked individuals where we have different sets of ties, and this is even simplified. We may have more ties in different sets of friends that don't know each other. Somebody told me today, I never want to see my sister-in-law again, so all kin are not the same. And we're connecting as individuals more than as family groups. Anybody here leave Facebook when their parents got on? Anybody here think about leaving Facebook at that point? Or modified your behavior?
Anybody here not on Facebook?
I did.
I'm not. Hey, I'm not on Facebook, remember?
I was thinking of the 20-year-olds more. So we've
I'm
gone
not on
back
Facebook
to
either.
I won't do it.
surveillance, maybe intergenerational surveillance. And we have back, who knows the word creeping? Do you know the word creeping? What does it mean?
Stalking someone, kind of.
Well, keep an eye on your friends. But fancy term which I invented, so I like it, is covalence, like surveillance. And surveillance is looking up, covalence is looking at, I don't let my students on Facebook, so we have a lot of mutual surveillance going on now on what people are doing. The big difference is you can control what goes on Facebook a lot more than in old village-like days. So we know that families function. Yeah, I can slow down, get be done sooner. Okay, get your questions ready. Function as networks rather than as groups. Remember, those of us old enough remember Fun with Dick and Jane with the dad. That was his name, Dad. He only had that name. Goes off to work, and Mom stays home behind the white picket suburban fence, and the children, Dick and Jane. And what was their dog's name?
Spot.
Okay. Spot stays with them and plays, and that was very much the family as a unit. We used to get in the family car driven by Dad and go every week to see another family group somewhere else in New York City. But now individuals are all going and hanging out separately with each other, have different friendships, different relationships, different address books and calendars and stuff like that. And adults and children are communicating through mobile phones. Young lady in the green shirt, what year did you get your mobile? How old were you?
Well, I had like a prepaid phone when I was like 11.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Normal age for getting some sort of mobile phone was 11, actually, in America. The last time we did, in Canada, the last time I looked at the data. And you thought you were being liberated, right? You could talk to your friends? What
We
else
did,
happened?
yeah.
What else happened?
I could text barely,
Yeah, and your mom could
call, like
call you and
emergency.
say, what are you doing now? Why aren't you home? So, mobile has had an interesting family dynamic. It used to be when Dad went off to work, Mom never communicated with him until he came back off his shift on the assembly line. Now Dad and Mom are each at computer screens in different places, and they can often find a way, either while they're working or taking bio breaks and using their mobile phone to text each other all the time. That's a major change. The homework boundary, I mean, I would guess that everybody here who has kids or a spouse has called their spouse or their kids today already, or texted them at home. And I would expect that every one of you works in your home or your dorm room or wherever you are virtually 24/7, maybe not in the middle of the night, but certainly the old notion that you work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 and stop it, well, it certainly changed in the area we've studied since 1967. And it turns out people, despite what the argument is that people don't like this, it turns out that when we did a study, and we did it a few years ago, so it may have changed in 2009, then most people are really happy about this. Let me just interpret this high-tech statistical analysis really simply. Just look above the bar. By a 5-to-1 ratio, that red's not showing up very well, more people said they think technology is keeping their families together than disconnecting it. What's even interesting is if you add these two numbers, 51 and 7, 58% don't even care. They say, oh yeah, that's just the way the world is. I don't think about technology anymore. So whereas people are making this moral outrage about how evil the community technology is and how it's disconnecting us, real people, real adults, 18 and up, are saying, yeah, it's great. Or just saying that's the way the world is. Big, big difference. Alex?
What's the methodology there? Is it purely surveying individuals?
Yeah, it's surveys. We ask people.
Is that really a good indicator of...
What's a better one?
Well, have you thought about other methodologies in terms of actually checking whether technology has really made people more or less connected? Because what people say is, what you're telling me is they either don't know, or they believe it's made them closer, but maybe they don't know what their counterfactuals are.
Good point. They do believe it's made them closer, if they think about it at all. Or else it's just in the background in their lives, and they don't even think about it. Just like until Flint happened, they believed that water was okay, right? Nobody said, let me finish. Did you believe that water was okay? Yeah, I just drank it. So that's a lot of the background stuff there. We don't have good longitudinal data, and we're never going to get it now, because very few people are on the internet, except, maybe I can do that, thank you for thinking, if I ever get the energy to do the 50-stroke study and the money, we can do that now. Because we're going to, actually it's a good segue, if you don't mind, Alex, to the next one, which is towards older adults. Bill?
Mary, I mean, we do have data about the number of friends people have nearby, far away, et cetera. And you can compare that with people who are online and offline.
Which data
So
set you're thinking of?
Well, certainly in Access we collected that, but it also again shows that the people who are not online are less connected. They're more isolated.
Yeah.
So there, any one survey question may be questionable, but there are all sorts of ways of getting at it.
Helen Hua Wang from Beijing and Annenberg School and now Buffalo and I used the World Internet Surveys, Jeff Cole's data, and we found the more people were online, the more active they were online, the more friends they had. Now that's that's cross-sectional. It's not one predicting to another, but it's a strong positive association with that.
So
It could
online friends or friends?
friends in general. Nobody, very few. We actually have a little number for online friends, but it's just like 2% or something like that. But basically, higher connectivity online is associated with larger reported. I got to say, it's reported number of friends. Different questions, but same survey. Now, it's not over time. It's not a panel study. We can knock a lot of holes in it, but that's sort of the stuff that keeps coming up, and Keith's stuff, his stuff, Lee Rainey's stuff at the Pew Internet, elsewhere. I think it's a done deal. Now, one of the things that this is from the Pew Internet surveys, the last set of people to go online, more or less, in overall American, this American data, 1980, were people over 65 or so. And he divides, I don't like these titles. I really read, I'm 74. I really object to the silent generation. You're smoking weed because I argued for it way back in the 60s.
Thank you very much.
That's why you're all so mellow. I mean, we helped stop the Vietnam War, which was before most of your time, but we're stopping. And when we went on the so-called Women's March for Peace, you know, there were a lot of people my age and my wife's age there are marching too. I don't think we've ever been silent, so I really get angry at the Pew people for that title.
No, because we also marched in the 60s
Yeah.
for a lot of other
Free
things.
speech movement at Berkeley. And this time, when we marched against Trump in the Women's March for Peace, we went right past the U.S. consulate in Toronto, and nobody shouted at them because most of the young folks didn't know that was the U.S. consulate and what it meant. It was very bizarre. Anyway, that's a sidetrack. So the point is that you guys, or most of you, are entirely online. And it goes down slightly till we get to these age groups. And when we did a special run for me, found that 65%, a little bit more than 2/3 of those over 65, which is a conventional kind of cut point for older adults, are now online. And we did, as I'll get to the next slide, shows you, we just did a study in Toronto in which we interviewed in depth. This is more qualitative than 42 older adults or senior citizens, 65 plus. And one thing we found is slightly more than half of them, 24 out of the 42, if you want hard numbers, which I won't believe, were using some form of the internet. And there are a number of reasons for it. One, as I've been at pains to point out, age is not a static category. I was young once. I should prop up next time I give this talk, a picture of me with hair. Actually, if you follow me on Facebook, you'll see the curly hair. Actually, I was 3 then. So people like Bill, like myself, like you one day will be older and you all know how to use this stuff. And if the world doesn't blow up in the next 3.5 years, you will be using this stuff. Second, you gotta do it. If you're looking for jobs, you're looking for boyfriends, you're looking for girlfriends, you want to see your grandchildren online, you're kind of forced to do that. One of my friends has been raising baby ducks, and I've been watching them grow from tiny things to big things. I won't mention your name. I learned a lot. For example, I learned ducks don't like to swim. You have to push them into the water until they learn that this might be good. That was kind of interesting. Secondly, people use mobiles. I really should aim that on mobiles. Mobile phones a lot because they're worried, but they're worried about their friends. And this is a way for older people to reach out for help or to make sure that their kin or close friends are in contact. And all these things came up in the in-depth interviews we did with our participants. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing. We interviewed 42, 24 were online. This paper, which is called, actually it's just been published, hasn't it? Took them a long time to get there, but they came out really quickly. It's called Connected Seniors because I think it rhymes better than Connected Older Adults. This is the kinds of things that we're finding. One, they use the internet and mobile phones. They don't even think that they use, well, I'm using an Apple. Let's say, yeah, I'm using a new phone like my adult child bought it for me. They use phones a lot. They actually talk on phones. How many people here have talked on a phone today? Actually put lips to the thing. Oh, that's pretty good. How many people texted on a phone today? Yeah. I think we just hit almost 100% on the texting. And that's a big switch. Older people, by the way, I'm 74, so I'm a little bit older. have not such dexterity on their fingers. I certainly can text slower than most of my students can. And it's interesting to us when you hear all the hype about Snapchat, Instagram, what's new? Anything newer than Snapchat and Instagram? WeChat, of course. Nevertheless, these Canadian Toronto seniors are using email. Old-fashioned email is what they like using the most. And they also like Skype if somebody sets it up for them, because they can look at their grandchildren. And that was pretty important. Or Facebook for the same reason. But it's a more passive use. They're not actively posting. What's interesting to me, and certainly was surprising, one was how little they were using the newer technologies, but also that they more want to connect with their friends than their family. Remember, these are people 65 and up. They see their families as pains in the butt, and maybe making burdens on them. Whereas their friends are people they want to see, but many of their friends have moved all the way around a lot. That really, and they basically value email for companionship and for help in using the email, help in using the internet. So digital literacy is a kind of form of social capital where one older adult helps another one in how do you do this. Or sometimes they ask their adult children. How many people here have been asked by their parents or grandparents to help them on a computer? That's not happening. You will. And just to kind of wrap this up. So we have older adults maintaining ties with family and friends, and they use a lot of things. The fact that, we said this before, that, and this is a paper with real data, real numbers, real quotes, and all that sort of stuff. They're moving around using whatever they can. They especially like email and phone to set up meetings, to set up get-togethers, and they see each other in person and they go behind. The only difference is neighbors. And neighbors are basically almost all, face-to-face kind of ties. It exists. And then I said this about expertise. So remember we started out, and this is the last slide, talking about the switch from groups to networks. So let's link this to your country. One of the downsides of the switch, or changes in it, to be neutral, of the switch from groups to networks is the lack of trust in institutions. Remember, people don't bowl in groups now, they bowl as individuals. And look at the switch. Whoop, sorry. Help. I'm a prisoner of Apple.
Max.
Max, I hate Max. Who's Mac? Who's Mac aware here?
What have we done here?
I don't know what I did. I waved my hands around. Oh, okay, now let's go to the very end.
Anybody have glasses?
What?
You gonna pass mine down?
Bill?
Where's that picture? Get a picture of that. Put them on, Bill.
We got it right there.
I gotta get to the
You
end.
have to
Okay,
speak.
we're gonna do it the stupid way. Okay, here we go. So, here's, to me, some of what's going on in the U.S. in the past year is the decline of trust in the U.S. Congress from, from 42, I know this slide by heart, from 42% somewhere in the past, but it was 1970s, to 9% now. And I think that's part of the reason, not the whole reason, of course, there was a big revolt against what was seen as Hillary and group institutionalization and the legitimacy. And what's gone on in Brexit and what's going on a little bit in France, although in France it seems pretty clear that that the very individualistic, racist Marine Le Pen will only peak out at about 30% and not win the election, but I could be wrong. It's only about 3 weeks away, so we'll find out what's going to happen there. Okay, so that's sort of my finish, and showing my own digital literacy and competence. But I'm very open for questions now. Thank you very much.
So I have a question, and you may not have the data on it, but seniors and the types of technology that they use. I was really surprised that seniors aren't using text.
So was I.
And I mean, it surprises me because it seems like such an integrated part of everyday life for support and primarily for like micro coordination. And it would seem like an affordance that would be particularly useful for seniors. So what's the barrier?
I think it's too. I think a lot of it's habit. You know, people know how to use a phone, which is different. Okay, I'm 74. When I was your guys' age, well, most of your age, my grandmother would get on the phone, and she was late 80s then, and she would shout on the phone to her relatives all over New York City because, you know, she wasn't really comfortable with the phone. So I think, and I do a lot of this by looking around. I live in a high-rise condo now. It's not assisted living. We walk down the street to a restaurant. And in fact, Bev and I are spent the past hour redesigning the fitness equipment there. But some of it is that just, that's all they want to do and know how to do. And I'll frequently get asked, my son gave me this fancy iPhone, what else can I do with it besides phone? And we have a friend doesn't even know how to use the contact list on her iPhone. She punches in numbers.
On the other hand, I got a text message from Europe today. I'm getting on the boat to
Yeah.
go on a river cruise. And I've gotten a couple of texts from her. And I'm the kind of, what Barry described before, I help her a lot on the internet. Bev, I just lost the screen. What happened? I didn't touch anything. And I run up the stairs and I find it all. So, and she's 89, going on 90. So there's a lot of variability. It depends on what you want, depends on what your needs are. At the same time, my friend can't use the contact list, but she can text and she can use a Cobalt.
Because he's using it like a phone.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we found is that part of the reason that older adults do text, when they do text, and it's not usually their preference, it's because of micro-coordination, because their kids and their grandkids, like it fits into their schedules. It helps, you know, so it doesn't, it's not as invasive as picking up the phone and calling them. And so there's some of that. But I was at a workshop at Northwestern last weekend where Aaron Smith from Pew was reporting. So new data coming out, new report next month from Pew. 80% of 65 and older, keeping in mind the constraints of Pew data, of course, report owning cell phones from their latest survey. Only 42% of those who own cell phones are smartphone owners. So part of it is, you know, they don't want it, or they don't have access to it, or resources. And then part of it's about the support and the training and teaching them how to do it and how to use it, you know, when things go wrong.
I mean, when I learned to use a large part of the internet by saying 2 words, something that you and Vivi would know. Hey, Bernie. Bernie Hogan was an Oxford Internet prof after he was my graduate student. Could you help me set this up? And a lot of that is friends helping friends of often younger generations, older generations.
It's interesting because the thing that struck me the most was, you talk about seniors not using texting, and just last week my 9-year-old, who's now had a phone for about 8 months, comes to me and says, Dad, can I get, you know, like that calling app on my phone so I can call Grandma? And I'm like, oh God, what have I done? You've had a phone for 8 months, you've never made a phone call? Like, I can do that?
That's my voice. And one of the things that it didn't come up, and it comes up in Pew data, I don't know if Aaron mentioned it, it comes up in ours, is younger older adults, which I would say I am, are more active users of the internet than middle-aged older adults in their 80s, or then in the 90s it really starts tailing off. Part of that may be because you're getting frailer, although we only talk to non-frail people, but part of it is when people learn to do this stuff. I mean, I met my wife, and we were once walking together before we were married, and I dropped a whole box of IBM cards. Only 3 of you in this room probably know what an IBM card is, but this is the way we used to put sorry. We used to put stuff in, and if you dropped them, you were dead. It was like 52 pickup in cards, except there were 10,000 cards. So we sorted them all out, and then I knew I should marry her. She's taken care of me ever since.
I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
So, I wanted to come to that last point you made, right, and probe a little bit on it. This is, you just make a very sort of bold claim here, and I'm wondering whether you could elaborate what the links between networked society and the distrust in an institution like Congress would be. I mean, this could be just a pure coincidence, or is it, what are sort of the mechanisms at work that you see from your research to
Well,
link those
it's not
two?
my research, it's Pew, and I haven't heavily analyzed it. But I don't know if Aaron Shaw is it, or Aaron Smith? Yes, Aaron Shaw is at Northwestern, so I get confused between the two Aaron. Elaborated on, but trust in most organizations is declining in the US. Is that because people are networked individuals? I don't know. I don't think anybody could know because nobody ever makes that jump. I'm guessing that.
You just made it.
Well, yeah, nobody else makes it. But I can't prove it. I don't think it's provable. But to my mind, it's part of the shift in not just US, but even Austrian and Canadian, other societies, towards more individualistic movement and less trust in your own organization and in your, whether you work there or political parties. I mean, you know, I'll ad hoc another example. One of the big newses in the French election of 2 days ago was the formal parties in France got decimated, and it was two ad hoc organizations. Well, Le Pen actually Marine has a somewhat formal organization, but the second place guy, basically, I'm sorry? Macron, yeah, just created something in his own name to do it. Now, whether they can carry parliamentary seats at the same time, I don't know. So that's what I'm guessing, and it's a guess. But I think it's a good guess. I'll stand behind it.
No, I think it would be, it's something that could actually be researched. I'm
How
not
you gonna
as
research
pessimistic as you are. I think it could be explored.
How are you going to
systematically.
research? Well, the one way I can think of doing it would take real money. Would be, I've made this thing that we've all turned to network individuals. We know that's not true. That some people are still in tightly knit networks. You read Arlie Hufschild's book called, I don't know the name, Strangers in Their Own Land, about Louisiana, where people in very northwestern Louisiana, very strong networks, very much Tea Party, and by inference voted for Trump, although she did the research before that. So these are kind of isolated, insulated groups, if you want to call them filter bubbles. So I'm working with somebody, Sheila knows, Alice Zhang at Northwestern, and Helen Wang, who got her PhD at Edinburgh and now at Buffalo, and we're going to study, and we're just starting to do it, we're going to study people in different kinds of networks and how that affects their behavior, how that's associated with, it affects too strong a word, their media use, and their leaning on each other for support. And, you know, call me back in a year, which I'd be delighted to go and drink another beer at Popcat.
What type of networks are you gonna study?
We can study the same ones we interviewed with. We have that information. I don't have money to do another study.
I sort of like your argument that these online networks enhance face-to-face communication, but I also kind of think of the downside of that is sometimes in online networks you learn things about people where you're like, I didn't know that about that person, and then there's, you know, you might want to dissolve your tie with them.
TMI.
I'm also thinking about the elections and how often I've learned about people's political views on Facebook, and other people I know learned that where I wouldn't have necessarily known. Have you ever, or do you know people who are studying, you know, tie dissolution and whether that kind of leads over into face-to-face relations?
Yeah, and this related to Meyerson's book on No Sense of Place, and where that was decades ago, but now the idea we know more about Congress, we know more about our friends, we know more about everything, and so the mystique of institutions is disappearing, and we know all their warts and problems and whatever.
Yeah. Well, Josh Meyerowitz never had any evidence.
It's a good thesis, though. I mean, I think it
It's a
may
good thesis.
explain
Go ahead,
the
Josh.
communication connection between trust and institutions. although,
We know everything about everybody except tax returns for the president.
but I read your question, because I tried to unravel the age issue as well, and I think the biggest problem is that there are three explanations for age, and one is aging, like less nimble fingers, the other is life stage, you're retired, you don't need to do certain things, and the other is, it's cohort, what people were using when you came of age and you started using the phone or texting. You cannot unravel these things. I mean, I found it impossible to unravel the cohort, aging, and life stage effects, so that, although I think life stage is more important than the other two, but that's only sort of teasing data out. But have you, I mean, in your work with the connected seniors and so forth, have you been able to unravel that?
No, we didn't try yet. And we don't have any measures of their manual dexterity, so
Yeah.
I don't know, so we won't be able to do that, but the other two are so intercorrelated. It's certainly true that you can't go beyond what's going on there. Sure.
Sorry, Barry, you got
You gotta
a
go.
glass of 5.
Okay. And it's 4 minutes, so it's one last question. Zach has a question.
Yeah.
And then you. We'll do 2 last questions.
Okay. So every generation's got its technological bogey, and you make the case that the current boogeyman is social media or mobile phone, something like that. So how much life does that boogeyman have left? And would you like to speculate which boogeyman will take its place once that one's dead?
Sure, Tickle is a young one.
So that boogeyman's got a lot of life left. Do we see the end to that version of the narrative? Care to speculate on what the next narrative is that will?
No, I mean, the thing that scares most people is autonomous driving, but I'm not sure how that has social impacts. It certainly has physical impacts,
Well, if we can get around in one-person cars,
but,
is that?
but most cars are one person right now. So we're ahead of you now. Now, Bob Putnam, who I waved at, thought it was television. And Tom Brokaw thought it was television too, and he looked back and said that the greatest generation was the JFK, John Kennedy era. So, and then Keith and I trace out, we go back to Karl Marx and Fred Engels about housing and industrialization. So everybody names something. I don't know what's going to happen next. For a while we thought Google would kill talking to your friends and neighbors about stuff. It doesn't, because although Elihu Katz, who's still functioning in his 90s right now, just came out with an article recently and said two-step flow of communication doesn't make sense anymore if it ever did. And he's the guy who invented the term. Because people talk back and forth, and then they go online, then they go offline, and it's the kind of thing, and mobile gets in the way. I'm still a desktop guy. I haven't forgotten you, Alex. I'm still a desktop guy, so I'm just amazed at how much reliance people have on their mobile phones for looking up stuff, which I find very cumbersome. Alex?
You actually pretty much answered most of my question. I was going to basically talk about these technologies for looking up stuff improving, and so this includes the recent wave is Amazon Echo, which doesn't seem to understand my parents' accent. But nevertheless, so these type of technologies do have this potential to create more individualism, and what you just told in your last answer is maybe they don't. Are there any actual studies about trying to actually isolate? How does, having everything available in Wikipedia or
I don't know of any.
Google?
But I'm going to actually give you number one, let me answer you directly. I don't know of any. That doesn't mean they don't exist, but I don't know of any. I think that the scariest thing, and here I'm going to be a scary pundit, is the growth of surveillance by state organs, via NSA or Mossad or what have you, KGB, FSB, sorry, or Google itself and Apple and stuff like that they know a lot about each other. Now, has this constrained what people will talk about and do online yet? I don't know. Do you know, Bill? You've been working with those guys. Forces of evil.
For decades, people are alarmed by this and yet
Keep doing it.
give up their privacy for everything else.
Yeah, including me. Yeah. But we do that. We have chapter 11 in here. And the fun part of it is we wrote 2 science fiction scenarios. One of them was agents are going to help us be autonomous individuals so that you will Skype in, you will do a hologram like in Star Trek and just appear with me, and we have a lot of autonomy, and Alexa will be wonderful and we'll do a lot of other things. The scary thing to me about Alexa is it's listening all the time and recording what you're saying. The other scenario is where the people are almost, there's one woman in the second scenario who can't move because she once smoked some weed or something, and she's unable to move around very much because she's being surveilled all the time, and government authorities have a dossier on her, and the insurance companies won't give her, I mean, this is America, won't give her health insurance, unlike the rest of the civilized world where you get it as a matter of right. So those are some possibilities, and that's database, really database plus surveillance going on. And a friend of mine, he used to be the highest civil servant in Canada, and I was fulminating to Alex the other day, said, remember, Barry, every time the government puts in a mechanism of surveillance, it never takes it back over time. And I don't know if he's right or not, but he's been...
Today's story is the Fitbit, solving a murder via Fitbit. So some woman took the different number of steps than the murderer claimed she would have taken in his scenario.
Well, I tend to turn on television at 10 p.m. and relax. And one of the ways I relax is watching NCIS. I've never ever said, what's the guy's name? The chief guy in NCIS, Mark Carmen in real life. I've never heard him say, we need a search warrant for that. I've never ever heard those words. They just call up these incredible dossiers on people instantly, and they're done. You know, and they got it all. Rama Lama Ding Dong, dude. Done. Okay, folks.
Thank you, Barry.
Hey, RB, could you?
Well, I don't. How do you turn this fucking?
It's a red dot. You want me to try it?
Got it.